In the limestone valleys of southern Europe, beneath layers of stone and ice, lie the silent remains of a people who once walked beside us. For more than a century and a half, their bones have been studied, displayed, and argued over, cast in roles that shifted with each new discovery. At times, they were imagined as brutish, primitive hunters. At other times, as fragile echoes of an ancient past. But now their story is beginning to change, not because of new tools or weapons left in caves, but because of the whispers hidden inside their DNA. Ancient genomes, preserved for tens of thousands of years, are revealing a past more complex, more far-reaching, and far more human than most ever imagined. These are the Neanderthals, our closest kin, and their story is no longer a simple tale of survival and extinction. For decades, researchers have puzzled over their beginnings. Their fossils stretch from Spain to Siberia, scattered across continents and across hundreds of thousands of years. But bones alone could never fully answer where they truly came from. The clues were partial, fragmented, sometimes contradictory. DNA has changed that. It has begun to tell us that the roots of the Neanderthals run deeper and farther than Europe, stretching back into a time when the landscapes of Africa and Eurasia were home to multiple kinds of early humans. Around 600,000 years ago, they branched from a shared ancestor, possibly Homo heidelbergensis, a species that itself left fossils in both Africa and Europe. But if the split began there, the traces in their cells point towards something more complicated. The earliest Neanderthal lineages carried hints of ancestry that did not come from Europe at all. Some of it seems to have flowed from the East, from populations in Central or even East Asia, before those ancestors ever set foot in Ice Age Europe. One of the most striking discoveries came from the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia. Buried there was the skeleton of a Neanderthal woman who lived more than 120,000 years ago. When her DNA was read, it revealed not just the story of her people, but signs of contact with another ancient human group altogether, the Denisovans. These mysterious relatives, known from only a handful of bones and teeth, left their mark inside her genome, showing that Neanderthals did not live in isolation. They met, mingled, and exchanged genes with other humans long before our species entered the stage. This suggests that their history was never a straight line of evolution, but a web of movements, encounters, and unexpected connections.
Even within the Neanderthals themselves, the DNA shows differences. Those who lived in Western Europe more than 400,000 years ago, such as the individuals from Spain's Cima de los Huesos cave, were not genetically identical to their cousins in the East. Some groups carried ancient signatures that others lacked. This points to repeated waves of Neanderthals moving into Europe, sometimes replacing earlier groups, sometimes mixing with them, and sometimes surviving alongside each other for generations. Their migrations were shaped by climate. Europe during the Ice Age was a land in constant flux, with vast glaciers advancing and retreating, pushing people south into refuges during the bitter cold, then pulling them back north as the ice receded. These shifts created opportunities for populations to meet, to merge, and to adapt in ways that bones alone could never show us. The DNA fragments also revealed something even older. Hidden in their genetic code are traces of a lineage that seems to reach back to Homo erectus, the first of our ancestors to spread widely across Asia nearly 2 million years ago. That faint echo suggests that the roots of the Neanderthals may not have been tied to a single homeland, but to a broad, interconnected range stretching thousands of miles, linking regions we once thought of as separate. Their origin may have been less like a single birthplace and more like a braided river flowing across continents, shaped by countless generations of movement. What is becoming clear is that the Neanderthals were not the slow, static people that older textbooks described. They were adaptable travelers who endured extreme cold, shifting environments, and constant uncertainty. They developed tools, mastered fire, and carried knowledge through landscapes most of us would not survive a single winter in. They were survivors in the truest sense, but also participants in a vast story of human connection that spanned both time and geography. The next great clue to their past emerged from the Caucasus Mountains in a cave called Mezmaiskaya. Here, archaeologists uncovered the bones of a Neanderthal child, a life cut short more than 40,000 years ago. Her DNA, remarkably preserved, told yet another story. She was connected not only to the Neanderthals of Europe, but to populations much further east, echoing the ancestry seen in the Altai Neanderthal. The Caucasus, long thought of as a border, was instead a bridge. It linked Europe and Asia, and through it, genes and traditions flowed back and forth, creating a living corridor between worlds.
These findings paint a timeline that is staggering in scale. Between 100,000 and 60,000 years ago, Neanderthals moved, retreated, and re-emerged across different regions multiple times. Each wave left subtle changes in their DNA, like chapters in a book whose pages were scattered but are now slowly being pieced together. And with each movement, there was always the possibility of meeting others. Denisovans, early modern humans, or perhaps lineages now long vanished. The story of Neanderthals, it seems, was never theirs alone. It was part of a shared human history, one that shaped not only them, but us. And that connection matters, because when we look at the genetic record, we discover that Neanderthals are not gone. Every person alive today outside of Africa carries about 1 to 2% of their DNA. These genes are more than ancient relics. They still shape how our bodies work, from how our immune system fights infection to how our skin responds to sunlight. The legacy of the Neanderthals is written inside us, a reminder that their world and ours are inseparably linked. Their origins, their journeys, and their encounters remind us that the story of humanity has never been a straight line. It has always been a network, a web of connections stretching across landscapes and generations. And as scientists recover more DNA from bones, from soil, even from the hardened plaque on fossil teeth, the picture will only grow sharper. Each discovery is another piece of a puzzle that is not just about them, but about us. If you're fascinated by these hidden chapters of our past, share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Neanderthals should be remembered as distant relatives or as part of who we are today? And don't forget to subscribe to Prehistoric Medievals, because the story doesn't end here. And yet, to see the Neanderthals as doomed from the start would be a mistake. Their story is not one of failure, but of endurance. For hundreds of thousands of years, they thrived in some of the most unforgiving environments the Ice Age could produce. They built shelters against brutal winds, created tools that improved across generations, and used fire not just for warmth, but to shape the rhythm of daily life. Archaeological evidence even hints at symbolic behavior, burials that may have carried meaning, pigments that could have been used as decoration, and traces of adornments that suggest a sense of identity. Far from being mindless hunters, they were people whose lives contained depth, community, and perhaps even imagination. The real twist in their story, however, lies in the fact that they never truly disappeared. While small, isolated populations of Neanderthals did vanish around 40,000 years ago, their genetic legacy continued, carried inside the bodies of the very humans who shared the land with them. Encounters between Neanderthals and early modern humans were not rare, and some of these encounters led to children whose genes still flow through our veins today. Every non-African population on Earth carries a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA, and those genetic fragments still shape our lives in subtle ways. Some influence how our bodies respond to sunlight. Others affect the way our immune systems fight infection. Even traits such as how we metabolize fat or respond to certain diseases have been traced back to our Neanderthal heritage. In a very real sense, their survival continues inside us. But there's more. DNA analysis shows that contact between Neanderthals and modern humans didn't happen just once. It wasn't a single brief encounter. Instead, it happened multiple times, across thousands of years in different places. Some of these events occurred in the Middle East, as humans left Africa. Others deeper in Eurasia, perhaps even before our Great Migration 60,000 years ago. One remarkable discovery suggests that Neanderthals themselves once received genetic material from early modern human relatives over 200,000 years ago, long before we thought our species had ventured far from Africa. This reveals that the connection between us and them stretches far deeper into the past than anyone expected. Even in their final millennia, the Neanderthals were not entirely eclipsed. In regions like the Caucasus, in caves such as Mezmaiskaya, their remains show clear links to both East and West, bridging populations across continents. Their lives were lived along corridors of movement and exchange, not in isolated refuges cut off from the world. And although their numbers dwindled, their story intertwined with ours until the very end. When modern humans expanded into Europe in greater numbers, they carried with them not only tools and strategies, but also genes that had already mingled with Neanderthals in earlier times. In this way, the final blending of our two species was not the sudden replacement of one by the other, but the culmination of a relationship that had been unfolding for hundreds of millennia. So why then do we still speak of their extinction? Perhaps because we prefer simple endings, but the truth is more complicated. The Neanderthals live on, not only in our DNA, but in the very shape of our shared humanity. They remind us that the human story was never a single path, but a network of rivers that split, rejoined, and carried forward fragments of all who walked before us. The Neanderthals were part of that flow, and their endurance in the face of unimaginable hardships left traces that we still carry today. When we imagine them, huddled by fires in icy valleys, trekking across windswept plains, passing knowledge from parent to child, we are also glimpsing something of ourselves. The hands that struck stone tools, the voices that may have told stories around the hearth, the bonds that held small groups together through long winters, all of it echoes faintly within us. Their lives were not lost to time. They are stitched into our own. As science pushes forward, extracting DNA from cave sediments, from fragments of bone too small to study by older methods, even from the hardened plaque of ancient teeth, the picture becomes ever clearer. The Neanderthals were not strangers. They were kin, fellow travelers on a journey that has never really ended. Their story is our story, and every new discovery brings us closer to seeing them not as shadows, but as people who shaped what it means to be human. If this journey through deep time makes you see our shared past differently, let me know in the comments. Do you think we should even use the word extinct for the Neanderthals? Or is it time to recognize them as part of us? And don't forget to subscribe to Prehistoric Medievals, where we'll keep uncovering the hidden chapters of our ancient world together.